Good morning, everyone. We'll give it just a few more seconds or minutes, and then we'll get started. But welcome this morning.
Hi, Susan.
2 days in a row, B.
I just told them that I would recognize you because I'd just seen you in a meeting yesterday.
Yesterday.
So we'll go ahead and get started, and being respectful for everyone that's here's time. First off, I want to welcome you all to show yourselves, be Brady Bunch style if you're interested, but if you don't, if you're in your pajamas, hanging out, whatever, then that's fine as well. We do want to make this interactive, though we do have 4 people that will be giving some information, but please feel free to share information in the chat box as we go. Katie will be monitoring that for us. My name is Jerry Campbell. I work for Partners Health Management, and I am a community engagement specialist for the North region, which is Surrey, Yadkin, and Iredell. And Amber, I'll start with you, and then if each of the partner staff that are a part of our committee want to introduce themselves, that would be wonderful.
Thanks, Jerry. I'm Amber Matthews. I'm one of the System of Care Community Training Coordinators at Partners. I'm excited to be here with y'all this morning.
Good morning. My name is Robert Anderson. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist for Cabarrus County.
Good morning, everyone. I am the Regional Director for Catawba, Burke, and Rutherford.
Good morning. I'm LaQuisha Martin-Hillian, and I am a part of the Geriatric Adult Specialty Team, better known as GAS. We cover Union, Forsyth, Davie, Stanley, and Cabarrus County. Thank you.
Just looking to make sure I didn't leave anybody off. So welcome this morning. Our topic today is teen dating violence. And we have a great panel that'll be sharing information with you today. And like I said, it's an open forum. Please feel free to ask questions as we go. We'll be monitoring the chat box throughout. Hopefully we'll get to all your questions. We try to do this in 1 hour. Our first speaker this morning is Rebecca Moffitt with CVAN, and she is their Assistant Director.
Good morning, everybody. I am Rebecca. Hi. I am the Assistant Director at CVAN, and this month, February, is Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. So some of you may know October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and that's, probably a little more well-known. But sometime in the 90s, teen dating violence became more of a thing that our community and our culture started to talk about. So I think that's been a wonderful addition to talking about dating violence, because we know that dating violence or domestic violence doesn't begin just when you become an adult. It begins truly when you start dating in any kind of relationship. So I'm going to pull up a couple of slides here, and hopefully I'm not going to be repetitive to those who are speaking after me. So I'm going to. And the other thing that I'm going to focus on, that I told Jeannie I would focus on so we don't get too repetitive, is focus on, from a parenting perspective, what can you do? So can everybody see, I guess, that first slide that I put up? What is teen dating violence? Some of you may have seen what's called the power and control wheel, and that is the way that you want to think about either domestic violence or dating violence, is that it is about power and control. That is probably the key thing, take away whenever you think about intimate partner violence at any age. And that is because it is not about somebody losing control, or about because he is using drugs, or because, all the different ways that you could spin it, that really at the center of any intimate partner Violence is about power and control. And you can see at the very center is that it is power. And then the rim around it is the physical and the sexual, and that is what holds it together. The threat is always there. It doesn't mean that it happens every day, but it means that the threat is there. The spokes of the wheel, as it says, it's ever present. And that just means that those things are, the threat is always there as well, but it definitely is something that is ever present. And many women and girls talk about how that is a harder piece to think about, talk about, even heal from. You see the stat down below, that this is a national survey that's done through Love is Abuse, Love is Respect, and that's a teen dating violence national group that I'll throw up their website too in a minute. But it's estimated that 70% of teen girls or teenagers ages 12 to 18 have experienced a dating relationship within the past year. You know, we could probably spend a very long time on this wheel, but I don't want to do that because we have a lot of great speakers coming up. But the key pieces are the intimidation, isolation, those kind of pieces can start in the beginning. And especially if you're a young adult, it's hard to think about maybe isolation and intimidation being, you know, truly abuse. Threats, peer pressure, you know, all those pieces. You know, again, we could talk about that, but just want to move along to the next piece. So from a parenting perspective, this is all adapted from, as I mentioned, loveisrespect.org. I would, you know, recommend that you take a look at that website because they have a lot of good information about dating violence. The key takeaway is that it's really about positive parenting, and that parents do play a very important role in kids' lives. Obviously, you know, can imagine if you're not a parent, you know, kids aren't necessarily always going to open up to their parents, you know, they do to their kids, but there is still a way that you can think about being a part of the discussion. So the key things to remember are that you want to be there to listen. Oh, did I have a question pop up? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I was just polling the audience while you were talking.
Oh, okay. No problem, no problem. So the key takeaways as a parent is to listen, that not jumping right in and being overbearing in any kind of situation, is to really step back and listen first, and observe. Is their behavior different? Is their normal activities different? Are they, for example, being a little more withdrawn from friends and family? Are they not engaging in the normal activities that they have been engaging in, for example? And it's got a couple of things that you can, you know, put out there. You know, I noticed you've been on your phone a lot lately, aren't you? The popular one, you know, depending on their response, you're likely to hear maybe a little bit more about what's going on. I noticed you haven't been hanging out with your friends, you know, rather than being overbearing, as I mentioned. So the next pieces to pull up are, you know, the key thing to remember is that dating abuse, you know, is a pattern of power and control over another person. So all the other tactics, you know, make a little bit more sense if you think of it in that way. The other piece to remember, if you're supporting somebody either as a parent or you know, as a friend, is that you have to believe them, and believe what they're telling you, you know, and letting them know that you appreciate them being honest. Focusing on their behaviors, not the person involved. That's a very important part from a parenting perspective, because children and teens can be, you know, they can feel like they're defensive, I guess really is the word. If you start letting them know that, oh, he's not a good person and you shouldn't date him anymore, they're going to get quite defensive. So you want to focus on the behaviors rather than the person. And then, just talking about them talking about their safety in a not very non-judgmental way. And then deciding on the next steps together. It's definitely something that they're going to need support around. There's a chance that they are going to school together. It's more complicated when they're teenagers for so many different reasons. The last slide is just to give you that information about what loveisrespect.org. Great resource around dating violence. We are the Cabarrus County, as I mentioned, domestic violence program. That is our hotline. We actually do a teen dating violence curriculum in the schools where we talk about dating violence, and we really step back and talk about it from a cultural perspective, because violence in our culture really is because of how our culture is set up. It's not an individual pathology. So one of the things that we do in our teen dating violence curriculum is we look at roles of men and women and boys and girls and expectations of dating and the relationship. And if there's a moment that we could even do one of those exercises, I don't want to take up all the time and move on to the next speakers, but I do want to offer that if we have any time to do one of those exercises. I'm not good at monitoring my own time, but I am going to stop share here and go ahead and leave it to the next folks to add their pieces. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And I'm sure there are some questions, but if you would all hold your questions to the end, that way we can get through our presentations. That would be wonderful. If you want to put them in the chat box, go ahead, and Katie will be monitoring that, and we'll follow up at the end. Our next speaker is B. Cote with Impact. And before I let her go, I started to give more credentials, but I just didn't want to mess it up. So I'm going to let her explain the rest of that. But welcome, B, to our community cafe.
Thank you. And I see some familiar faces here. It's so good to see everybody. So yes, my name is B. Cote, and I have been running the Impact program. It will be 15 years next month. And Impact is a state certified what we used to call battering intervention program, and the state now calls them DVIPs, domestic violence intervention programs. And I am going to paste in the chat right now a website where you could go to find out about any domestic violence programs in the state, whether they be DVIPs or victim services programs. So you can go to that link and find the programs in your own communities along with the contact information there. And so we serve Mecklenburg. We're out of Mecklenburg County, but we also serve Union, Gaston, Cleveland, and Lincoln counties at this time. We are all virtual until further notice. We'll be starting back face-to-face in Charlotte pretty soon, and then back into the outlying counties. And what a DVIP is, it is a non-clinical program. And the reason it's non-clinical is because domestic violence does not have a clinical cause. And a lot of people are really confused about that. And what that also means is that a lot of us aren't trained in domestic violence in grad school. If you're a therapist, it's very likely that you didn't study intimate partner violence, which is, what we call domestic violence, but that includes teen dating violence. So we don't pathologize domestic violence. Now, what happens is you're going to see a lot of folks who are suffering from the effects of domestic violence, and who have co-occurring problems. But again, it's really important to note that if you're seeing somebody and domestic violence pops up, the very first need is not for counseling, it's for safety. Okay, and then counseling can come later once the safety needs of the victim are met. Now, having said that, I work with the abusers and I only work with men ages 16 and up. And it's a group program, and there are a lot of regulations that we have to follow to be in compliance with the state. And some of those regulations are the length of the program, which is a minimum of 26 weekly sessions. With my program, hold on here just a second. This is our curriculum. Okay, it's pretty heavy, over 300 pages. And what they do is they are either court ordered, they're sent by DSS, they're sent by their therapist, or they come on their own. They do not have to be court ordered to my program. To some others, maybe, but not to ours. And so this is what they work on. So if you've got a client, and like I said, I only work with men because there just aren't enough women offenders for us to have a separate group. I just can't afford to do that. And most women offenders are actually responding to abuse rather than initiating abuse. And so what we want to look for is who is the predominant aggressor. And sometimes in dating violence situations that gets really muddy too, you know, because you've got two kids who look like they're fighting. But domestic violence and dating violence are rarely mutual because, like Rebecca said, it's based on a power differential in the relationship. And if there's a power differential in the relationship, then the person with the power is going to be your abuser, and the person who doesn't have the power is going to be your victim. And that dynamic isn't equal. So if you've got somebody where it looks like they caused the injuries first or they struck the first blow, that does not necessarily mean that is the abuser. Okay, that's very important to note, because once we label somebody as the abuser and they're the victim, they're going to be labeled, right? They may lose their kids. They may go to jail. They may lose any professional license. They may lose their job. And Susan, I'm sure, can talk more about that too. But so one thing I want you to know then, that we've got strict rules we've got to follow. Okay. And I do a lot of training of clinicians statewide and nationally. If anybody's interested in knowing more about how to recognize domestic violence in your practice, how to refer, when to treat, and that kind of thing, I've got a lot more information about that I'd be happy to share with you. ACOMA, DVIP, oh good. Where is that, Marguerite? Oh, Iredell County. Okay. Yeah, I used to be in Iredell County. I used to be in Stanley, and I used to be in Cabarrus. The only way I'm going back to any new counties, quite frankly, is at the invitation of the judges. Because without the judges in buy-in, the programs just weren't happening. So, and that's unfortunate. And yeah, thank you, Rebecca. So yeah, there are good things happening. I know the head of the DV team in Iredell County. She's really good. She's an advocate at the courthouse. Her name is Robin. And it's important to make those connections, because here's the thing. Anytime there's a discussion about domestic violence in your community, there needs to be a DVIP person at the table. Because you cannot separate out abusers from abuse. I have a hashtag that says only abusers can stop abuse. People working with victims are healing and putting Band-Aids on. They're not stopping abuse. All right, only the guys causing the abuse, and it's mostly men, although there are some women who are abusive. But only they can actually stop the abuse. And the only way they can do that is if we provide them with the tools. Are we a magic wand? No, we're not. But we're the best chance. And we are domestic violence victim advocates. People who work with abusers are advocates. We're working at it from a different viewpoint. Jerry, okay. Wonderful. I'll be happy to talk about that some more. Jerry put something in chat. So I'm not going to go into detail with, you've already gotten some basic DV information from Rebecca. You're going to get more from the other speakers. But I want to give you a little situation that happened a few years back in Union County. I had a group, and we could only serve them in a group primarily, right? If we do anything individually with them, it is in addition to their participation in the group program. And we're all about accountability, by the way. It doesn't mean we're mean. It doesn't mean we pick on them, right? It just means that we hold them accountable, and that's what we're there for. Marguerite's laughing at me, but you know what I'm talking about, right? And so in this group I had, it was a bunch of young guys. And I asked a question. I said, how many of you witnessed domestic violence as children? And about, it was three men raised their hands, and they were all very young men. One was Hispanic, one was Black, and one was white. And they were all like 20 to 23. And I said, raise your hand if you were determined to never abuse women the way you saw your mother being abused. And they all three raised their hands. And then I said, how old were you when you broke that promise? Two of them said they were 16, and one said he was 18. And that was only physical assault. That wasn't everything else on the wheel that Rebecca showed you. So they didn't recognize that they were being abusive until the first time they punched a girlfriend, which was really the first time they had a girlfriend. And I said to them, what was your very first thought? The minute you struck that girl, that very first time, what was your first thought? One of them said, bitch should have called the police. The other two said, it felt good. So despite the fact that they were child witnesses who were determined never to be abusers and never to repeat in their own lives what they saw happening when they grew up, they felt a sense of power and satisfaction from that very first time. And yet, when we work with these young girls who are dating, the message is, and women too, right? The message is just to be patient, keep trying. He's going through some things. But that's not why he abuses. And I give the ACEs, everybody's familiar with the ACEs, right? I give the ACEs to my clients. And I got to tell you that they are no more, there are no more, I guess the numbers are about the same with the clients who witness domestic violence as children as the regular population. So that's not what causes it. What does cause it? Back to the power and control wheel. And Rebecca, the one I use is a little bit different. It's on the back of their book. It's in their book. It's all over the place. And it's a little bit different in that over here, instead of minimization, denial, and blaming, we've got using obfuscation, which I like better because number one, they have to learn to pronounce it. And number two, it covers more ground than minimization, denial, and blaming because it covers the whole gaslighting piece. In addition to that, what they want to work on, what they work toward, is the equality wheel. And I don't know if there's a teen equality wheel. I got to tell y'all, there's a wheel for everything. All
There
right.
is.
Everything, every population, every language, every faith, every subgroup, every, Klingons, whatever, there's going to be a power and control wheel for it. Lately, I have been on, and Susan knows I get on these little soapboxes. Y'all, I'm old, so I can get away with shit I couldn't get away with when I was younger. Lately it's been post-separation abuse, because if you haven't heard, most domestic violence murders happen because a victim leaves the relationship. The studies show us 75%. In actuality, that's only like when they're past the separation, not going to separate, trying to separate, or just recently separated. So when you add all that in there, it's closer to 95%. 95% of domestic violence murders happen because she left. Why would we ever encourage a victim to leave an abuser? We should never do that. Can you imagine the guilt you would feel if you pushed somebody to leave their abuser and he stalked her and killed her? We've got to trust that victims know best, that victims are trying their hardest, that they're doing the best to protect their kids, right? And kids who are involved in dating violence relationships may or may not witness domestic violence at home between their caregivers. It doesn't seem to matter. They're getting the messages from their own communities, whether that's at home or not, whether it's their peer group or not. Every time a friend doesn't say something to his friend for being mean to his girlfriend, he's complicit and has allowed his friend to continue abusing. I'm looking here. Do you feel they didn't feel the power and control when they first witnessed their mothers being abused? At the time, I think they may have felt helpless, actually, and may have felt like, they were too young, too small, too scared to protect their mothers, and we just don't know. We just know that these guys may immediately feel remorse, or they may immediately feel the power. But my guess is that the emotion that comes first is the power. The remorse is not going to come until there are some consequences. Okay? That's not going to come till later. And another one of my soapboxes, Susan, another one of my soapboxes is labeling every abuser as a narcissist. Please
Right.
stop.
Oh, yeah.
Please stop. Okay? Not every narcissist is an abuser. Not every abuser is a narcissist. I don't have any more narcissists in my groups than in corporate boardrooms. In fact, there are going to be more in corporate boardrooms than there are in my program. Please stop. There's no such thing as narcissistic abuse. You don't see it anywhere on the power and control wheel. If you are seeing somebody who says, I'm a victim of narcissistic abuse, Are you accepting that diagnosis for somebody that you've never met? And is that ethical? Okay, so turn it around into healing, right? For her, for the victim, rather than focusing on what was wrong with him. Because victims often want the question answered, why would he do that to me? Why would he choose me, a person he said he loved, to do this to? And they can't wrap their heads around it because the answer is because he wanted to. And that's not a good enough answer for many victims. All right, so I'm off my soapbox now. I'm done. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask me. I think we have a question and answer period. Okay. All right.
We will. And Glenda,
Okay.
I do see your hand raised. So we'll come back to that if that's okay with you. I see your hand raised. B, thank you so much for that. I look at this and reflect, and we try to keep these to an hour. But as you can see, sometimes the information that's being shared and the discussion is so powerful, it's hard to do so. But we do want to try to do that. Again, thank you so much, B, for that information. And we will give some time at the end for chat. And if we end up flowing over a little bit, then so be it. We'll do that because we want to make these meaningful to each of you in the community. Thank you again. Our next speaker is Sarah Carbley, and she is with Family Services for Sight.
Hi, everyone. I have a short PowerPoint I'm going to share. Some of it is repetitive to what Rebecca had talked about earlier. So I'll kind of go through it quickly so we do have time for questions. So I'm Sarah Carbley. I do community outreach and engagement at Family Services and for Sight, so like Winston-Salem area. So some warning signs of teen dating violence are, excessive jealousy, insecurity, invasion of privacy, pressing partners into unwanted sex, controlling tendencies, taunting and bullying, and physical harm. So some of those do kind of correlate with what you see in like adult IPV. Here's the power and control wheel again. We use this a lot. I'm sure everybody does. It all goes back to power and control. So what we do when we have clients come in, adult or teens, we have these printed off and we just kind of give them a highlighter and let them have one of these and just take a minute and kind of reflect on it. And, they'll highlight things that have been going on in the relationship, and they might have, in the end, they're like, like, I didn't even think about this. Like, all of this has happened, but I didn't think that it was abusive until it got out of control. So we always refer back to this. I talk about this all the time, even in every presentation I do. I talk about this because it all goes back to it. So, and again, they are there for everything. This one is for teen dating, but there's a power and control wheel for everything that you can think of. So about our interpersonal violence programs, we have the Domestic Violence Shelter, we have Bridges to Hope Family Justice Center, and we offer counseling services. So you do not have to be 18 to utilize the Family Justice Center. You do, if you are under 18, you do have to have a trusted adult with you. It doesn't have to be a parent, but there does need to be an adult with you. There you can work on filing protective orders, safety planning. We have advocates that go to court every day with people, civil and criminal court. And if you go there to file a protective order, you do see a judge that day virtually. So it's kind of a one-stop shop where you don't have to go to the courthouse. You don't need to go to the police department. You don't need to go somewhere else for counseling services, legal aids on site. It's kind of a one-stop shop for everything to get done. So you aren't telling your story 5 different times to 5 different people. And so again, like I said, you don't have to be 18 to get our services there. You do just have to have a trusted adult with you. And like Rebecca had mentioned earlier, 12 to 18-year-olds, there is a high percentage of them experiencing teen dating violence, but also 18 to 24-year-olds are the highest population that experience domestic violence, unfortunately. Is I mean, I started college when I was 17. That is a very young age to start college. So that is very formative years. And also like it's a lot of their first time moving in, they're living on their own for the first time. Fraternities and sororities are recruiting, homecoming's happening, football season. So just a lot of factors play into that. So they call that the red zone. And here's just our information, our Family Justice Center hours, the address, and our 24/7 crisis line for Forsyth County. Obviously, if you're not in Forsyth County and you call it, you will not be turned away, but it is based in Winston-Salem. So that is just some of our information. If anyone has any questions at all, you can call that number, call the Family Justice Center, or visit our website and get more information.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Greatly appreciate you joining us today with one of our new counties, Forsyth. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Susan Sullivan, and she is with Cleveland County Abuse Prevention Council.
Okay, thanks for having me today. I'm going to try to clean up here because I'm going to try to maneuver my discussion through what's already been covered so that we don't duplicate anything. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor, and I work solely with adult and teen victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, teen dating violence. And I think there's some unique things about the teen population that we haven't addressed today that make it, number one, hard to identify if dating violence is going on, but also it creates barriers to them getting the assistance they need. So let's talk about something Sarah just said, that there's a target group, and I think Rebecca reflected it too, of very at-risk ages, and those ages are 12 to 18, but we haven't really talked about what makes that group so vulnerable to abuse. There's some very specific developmental things going on with 12 to 18-year-olds that unfortunately can play right into not getting help, not wanting the abuse to be recognized, even if they recognize it themselves. So let's think about people in that age group. Let's think about what teenagers are doing just trying to grow up. This is typically a population that hasn't had a lot of experience with personal control over the things in their lives, right? Everything is dictated for them up to this point. So the teen years are about figuring out, what do I have control over? What do I not have control over? How do I step out of my childhood role? How do I reach for an adult role? So when things happen in relationships for teenagers, that idea of I'm trying to individuate is actually a barrier for them reaching out to ask for help if something's going wrong in the relationship. So whether they're the perpetrator or the victim, kids don't want to come to the adults in their life and say, I don't know about this choice I made in this relationship. Things don't seem to be working out. Do we know any teenagers that are really good at doing that? No, because they want to be perceived as capable. They want to be perceived as grown up. So when they hit the teenage years, the adolescent years, they want to handle things themselves. So even if they find in the relationship, I'm not sure I can handle this, they're very leery about reaching out to adults because they're, just from anecdotal experience working with teens, what they're most afraid of is someone's going to pull back the control on them. The parents are going to say, well, you can't see this boy anymore, or worse yet, you were too young to start dating. We don't want you dating at all. We're going to restrict your movements. So what I see a lot as a parental response to teen dating violence is the victim's going to get punished. We don't intend to do that as parents or as educators or as professionals, but a lot of times that is what happens. And that's exactly what adolescents are afraid of. If I share this information, someone is going to shut me down and I'm not going to be allowed to go to the football game. I'm not going to be allowed to go shopping. I'm not going to be allowed to have time on the social media with my friends because my parents are afraid for me. So we have to understand what some of the barriers are to victims actually talking to parents, educators, and professionals about what's going on. I found an interesting statistic not long ago that 81% of parents don't even see teen dating violence as something they need to be worried about. 81% seemed a very high number to me. But if we pair that with some of the statistics that Rebecca gave earlier, kids are not coming to their parents necessarily and saying this for all kinds of great developmental reasons. What I hear from kids are that a lot of times they themselves don't even recognize that it's abuse. So, you know, reflecting back on what B was saying, if someone's been raised in an environment where people yell at each other a lot, or there's been abuse in the family, they may not immediately recognize what's going on in their relationship as abusive. This might just be, yeah, this is how my family handles problems. So why is this a problem? Why should I be talking to a teacher about this? This goes on at home. So we also have to look at the environment that the adolescent's grown up in, or the violence that they've been exposed to, which again, I give you credit, B, for doing the ACEs with everybody, because it's so important to know where somebody's come from and what their experiences have been before you start working with them. We also have to look at peer group with adolescents. As adults, again, we're very self-determining as adults. We have control over lots of things. We have the ability to determine if our peer group is a healthy one or not. Teenagers aren't always great at evaluating their peer group. So if teens are in a peer group that endorses this kind of behavior, or especially with young women, what I see a lot is, don't ever say you can't handle something, right? Girls have got to be tough. Girls have got to represent. So if you're in a peer group that you're getting that message from, and your boyfriend is starting to do some of these emotionally controlling things, the response is get tougher. I'd like the response to be get out. But if the peer group is saying get tougher, right, give it back to him, then what we see sometimes is I have teen girls mimicking that behavior just to survive in the relationship, right? Their peer group is endorsing it. They're thinking, well, this is how I survive in a relationship. I don't run from it. I stick it out and I get tougher. So I think that's a disturbing trend that I'm seeing a lot in the teens that I work with, is somehow you've got to be as tough as the person you're with. And I don't know that that's going to get the teen anywhere. Other barriers to getting help. We are also a rape crisis center. So I haven't heard this talked about a lot, but sometimes with teen dating violence, it's not just about the physical, verbal, and emotional stuff. That if there's a sexual component to that abuse, if there's sexual coercion, it takes on a whole different element for young women. And young women who are coerced into having sex by their abusive boyfriend, or are manipulated to have sex by their abusive boyfriend, the threat of outing that socially, if she's not ready to do that, can be a huge barrier to her talking to anybody about what's happening, especially if her parents don't know that she's sexually active, if she was a virgin when she got together with the boyfriend and he's coerced her into doing sexual things. There's an extreme fear about that being outed into the teen social community. And I think we've all had experience with how that happens through social media, through even just spreading rumors at school, but it's so much more pervasive now with the digital technology that kids have access to. So I have noticed that dating violence is dramatically complicated when there's a sexual component to what's going on. It makes it much, much harder for teens to turn to their parents who may not know that they're sexually active at all, let alone being abused and manipulated to have sex with somebody. So I think we covered a lot of good things when Rebecca talked about what parents can do. I also want to highlight what professionals and what educators can do. We also can model healthy relationships for kids. Kids learn from a variety of places, and teens often look away from their parents for role models, even though it's kind of built in because they've been in a parental environment a lot of times their whole lives, sometimes not, but they're also looking for non-parental role models at this age. So you as an educator, you as a professional who maybe work with adolescents, you have the ability to impact through modeling. So if you're modeling healthy behaviors, if you're responding appropriately to danger and safety, I want to make sure that everyone's on board with it is important to involve the teen in decision making, but as a parent, as an educator, as a professional, if there's a danger or safety issue, it's so important to model for the adolescent, this is how we're going to address this. And it might mean getting law enforcement involved. It might mean filing a civil protective order. It might mean getting the school involved at an administrative level. So I think sometimes when we as adults don't step up and address safety issues, and I'm talking about safety and dangerousness here, if we treat those as just sort of, well, this is part of the relationship, and if we end the relationship, this will go away, we're missing the boat. So for me, that's a huge issue, is how are the adults in this adolescent's life responding to safety and danger issues, and is it appropriate? So what we do at the Abuse Prevention Council here in Cleveland County, it seems to be a lot of what the other folks talked about. We definitely offer community, school, and youth group education. One of the things I offer is family consultations. So not only am I available to meet with teenagers, but sometimes mom and dad have no idea what to do. So we definitely offer time-limited consultation experiences for parents and caregivers to talk about what are you seeing, how are you responding to it, and does your teen need an outside person to talk to? Because we all know that teenagers, they like to talk to other people sometimes. They don't always like to talk to their parents. They don't always want to share that they've been drinking with their parents, or that somehow there's other sort of family rule breaks that have happened in conjunction, either because the abuser has encouraged it, or the adolescent was just being an adolescent, and as part of dating this person, they've stepped out and broken some family rules. So it's much easier to talk about those things with an educator or a counselor than it is their parents sometimes. So at APC, we definitely offer those services too, as well as direct services for adolescents. I don't know if I've used my time or not.
Thank you very much, Susan. Greatly appreciate it. And as you can see, we worked hard to bring together a really informed group of people to speak to you all. And I know that's generated some questions. And Katie, I'm going to turn that over to you to kind of monitor that, if that's okay. But I do want to start with Glenda, because I've noticed her hand raised for a while. So we'll move right into the Q&A section, but Glenda, let you go first since you've had your hand up.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of say that sometimes I think it goes like a little underrated or underreported, that sometimes there is a lot of cases where the women are the abusers but play the victim after the fact, simply because they are women, and even though they may seem like the weaker counterpart, sometimes it's not always as it appears. Because I've actually had domestic violence people who I've counseled who were actually the aggressors. They were the abusers in the relationships. And when we got deeper into their sessions, it was because that was how they were, that was their environment. So before they were the victim, they would be the attacker. They would be the ones doing the, the aggressor during the whole situation. And it was almost like when the other person, the counterpart, becomes almost, I guess you would say, when they become the trying to defend themselves from the other person, then it almost be like the tables will turn. And it's kind of hard to decipher, but I think sometimes we have to not be so biased in our decisions to be quick to think it's always the male counterpart in those situations.
Thank you, Glenda.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions or thoughts from other people? I know, Amber, you had a question.
I do, because I was kind of thinking it kind of adds on to what Glenda was saying, because I know we've been mentioning that it can go either way when it comes to sex, but I also wonder about same-sex relationships and the LGBTQIA plus community. And if there's any like research or any efforts specifically with that community when it comes to teen dating violence.
Anyone from our panel or anyone else that has good knowledge?
So I can't speak directly to the research involving the LGBTQ community and teens, because quite frankly, I don't think there's nearly enough research on that age group and that overlap at all, let alone in the area of teen dating violence. But to kind of address Glenda and Amber's question as far as gender, we're very careful to sort of not really look at gender and look at who has the power and control in the relationship. So when we train staff and interns and volunteers and the community, we're really asking them, and I know B can speak to primary aggressor, and I've actually been to her training on that, which was wonderful. So what we really talk about is who holds the power in this relationship, right? Not who has the physical strength necessarily, not who was the last person to get the biggest, baddest hit in during the argument, because certainly there are teens that, like I said, they are encouraged by their peer group or their own survival to kind of step up and fight back. And it's not to say that those arguments don't happen where both people are hitting each other, but you're really taking it back to its most basic level on all those power and control wheels, which is who in this relationship holds the power, not just during this argument, but outside of this argument, right? So the assessment is all about who's got the power in this relationship, not who hit harder or who's bigger. So I appreciate Glenda's comment, because we're always looking for who's got the power, because that's the person who's wielding it during the arguments, even if somebody else engaged physically and happened to appear stronger in that moment. It may not be the person who has the power in the relationship.
Susan, I think that's a really good point. And the question I often get is, how do we know who has the power? How can you tell? What would you tell people?
So what I would tell people is look at the bigger pattern in the relationship, right? Who is the person that pulls the strings? Who is the person who's trying to appease the other person? Whose needs are getting met in this relationship, right? And sometimes we don't always have all that information. So doing a thorough assessment, or as a parent, understanding who your kid is, but also being involved in their dating relationship. Not just getting involved when something goes wrong, but being a part of their dating relationship, understanding what the bigger relationship looks like, definitely is something parents can be involved in, as well as counselors and educators. So understand what the bigger picture is, not just kind of laser focus your camera on the last argument or on the arguments. Look at how they're behaving outside of the arguments.
Yeah, one little sneaky way I've got is who can lace up their shoes and walk out in the middle of an argument without fear of repercussion.
Right.
And I want to say too, I have a teenage daughter. I have 4, but I will say through generations of time, she's probably so much social media. And I think that has been just too much front and center in front of the students. They've seen so much violence, so much. They think it's okay to carry a gun, to smack somebody upside the head. They think it's okay too. I feel like a lot of times their friends in their circle are just as dangerous, because your friends tend to want to be in your ear telling you so-and-so said this, so-and-so said they're going to do that, and they'll do it on social media. They do it in their faces. And these are supposed to be to them, those trusted friends, and they're honestly not trusted friends that I would want in a circle. So I think, again, what I've tried to say to my own daughter, you have to be honest and say, okay, it's hello, and you and I don't hang out anymore. And I know that's tough. That's probably hard, because particularly if you've grown up around someone since you were 5, and a lot of these students are very, very close to each other, but unfortunately separation happens. And you need to somehow eliminate those people, not necessarily not want to speak to them, but I think you cannot have confidence in them, because sometimes they will instigate and make something really bigger than what it needs to be. And I think we just need to really tell our children the real truth. And the other thing I wanted to say too, just a lot of our children, particularly a lot of our teenagers, they have only had a parent, one mom or grandparents. And I know that a lot of my teenagers, their model of a relationship is their grandparents. They have grandparents who've been married for 50, 60, 70 years, and that's who they talk to when something goes on. They don't run to their mother, and dad, lots of times he's not there. So grandma and grandpa have taken on the role of mom and dad. And they really lean on them a lot. And so many times we see, just in our own culture, that's who raises a lot of these children. It's the grandparents who have had to take on that role in a direct or in an indirect way. But, I really appreciate what everybody is saying, but I guess for me, I just feel like it's some of the same things I saw when I was growing up. It's just that we have a lot, they have so many other things in front of them that we didn't have. We didn't have cell phones, we just didn't have all this. There's just a lot of things that are a danger to our kids, not just the people, these different platforms that I think have created too much confusion for these young people. And I think we have to be really smart in making sure that we're telling them the real truth, and just talk to them. Thank you.
And
Can I say something?
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, because I was waiting, but like I said, I do a domestic violence program, and recently we've been doing teens. I worked a lot with teens. I guess one of the fears I have right now is that people will think that people who are actually victims, who can be women, are not victims. Sometimes women react because of anxiety, and that's what I find in my private practice as well. So she becomes the abuser in reaction to the abuse she suffered before. So before he even puts his hands on her, she hits him. So we have to be very careful not to victim shame. That's one of the pits we all could fall in. And so they're less likely to come forward because they don't want to be seen that way. And another big area is the LGBTQ. I've never gotten a group built up. I've had one client. I've done this program before years ago, and I left it. I came back to it. I had one client who was a gay male, and in the group, he was in there with the men, because the way the Duluth model teaches you to handle it is that they're in there with men, unless you have a separate group. So for him, we had to work out a way for him to come out eventually, just like with his parents. So these are still areas that we're developing in. And we just have to be careful not to alienate any victims. Because personally, one of the reasons I got into domestic violence, the first couple I saw abusing each other was two lesbian women.
Yeah.
And so a lot of younger people have the impression that if they're with someone of the same sex, that domestic violence won't happen, which is another myth that we have to dispel. So as we go along, experiences teach you differently. But what I do know is that it's not good no matter who does it. And we all have to do our part to stop it.
Yeah.
And I guess I could be quiet now because I'm known to talk a lot.
I'd like to throw one statistic out there that always makes an impact. Every single year, we get statistics from the Healthcare Project at CMC Maine, our main hospital here in Charlotte. They keep really good numbers. And every single year, about 95% of the people who show up at the hospital with injuries related to domestic violence are women. All right. So that's statistically very important fact. Okay. So we can talk about men being abusers, and what we forget about is that many men are being abused by other men. that part of the statistic is left out when we talk about how many men are victims, right? So statistically significant is the fact that it's mostly men causing injuries and deaths to mostly women.
Right.
And even with that being said, even when it comes to men being abused by women, men aren't, because of ego, they're not going to report it.
And neither
It's
do
not
women.
going to be
Women-
reported. And a lot of
Women don't
women
report either.
yeah, and women aren't going to report. And even when it's same sex, a lot of times they don't report it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't come out until something, if they have children involved, you may not even know about the violence, because even those who I've counseled who were in same sex relationships, that's when it comes out. That's normally when it comes out that they were in same sex abusive relationships, because it starts coming out with their children being affected by it.
That's right. Most people don't report at all, 7 to 12%. And it doesn't matter what the reasons are all over the board. And so, just as many male victims don't report as female victims, it's just people don't report. 7 to 12%. That's all of serious assaults that are reported.
We're at our time, and I always look at the group and our Brady Bunch screen, and I kind of monitor how many people were on when we started and where we were when we ended, to kind of determine if this was productive and valuable. And we have one speaker had to step away, just left, and one other person left from the time we started till now. And I think that just shows that, an hour later, that the group seemed to see this as a valuable use of your time. And the other thing, before I turn this over to first Amber and then Katie to close us out, is I also want you to look around the room and ask who's not here. And how do we do these cafes monthly, and the whole purpose is to be geared towards the community and stakeholders. That involves not just the people that do the services that are directly connected, and I see a lot of you here, but it also involves the Barbara Johnson, who works in a different role in the community, and others such as her. I just happen to know Barbara, she's in Mooresville, but we're missing those pieces to give them this valuable, critical information. So we depend on you, partners, to bring those people to the table that we don't necessarily have the access you may have, to tell them that, hey, Partners does this monthly. We offer others. Please go to our calendar for more information about the internal and externals we offer to the community and to those we serve as members. But there's a lot of people that could have gained a lot out of our 4 speakers today. And it's just a shame they're not here. But like I said, because clearly an hour later, and now I'm talking too much, and not making it worth your time. But there's a lot of people that aren't here, and how do we get them to get this information? So with that, I want to turn first to Amber to share something related to this topic, and then Katie's going to close us out.
Thanks, Jerry. I just want to mention that my co-trainer, Jeannie Patterson, has a history of working with people in domestic violence relationships, and she offers a training every month about domestic violence specifically. We talk about warning signs, and we talk about things to do and things not to do if you are aware of someone in a intimate partner violent relationship. So I just wanted to put that plug out there. If anybody would like our monthly training flyer, send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat and I can forward that to you. These are virtual online trainings and they are free. So we would love to see some of you guys there.
Thanks, Amber. And I want to get this out there really fast before we all get off. I want to ask our panelists if you have any asks of our audience, like our community members, how we can help support you in your organizations if you have volunteer needs, and what we can do as a community to come around supporting your agencies.
Yeah, what here in Cabarrus County, our volunteer opportunities aren't as strong at the moment because they're still lower with COVID, but I can type in our website and just say it now, www.cvan.org. Very simple. And you can pop in there and learn about, how to make a financial gift and about the volunteer opportunities that we do have. So I'll type that in there.
And I have a nonprofit, I think I said this at the beginning, called Step Up to Family Safety, that provides scholarships, it provides community education, lots of other good stuff. And we're always looking for good board members and of course for donations to that.
And did our other panelists may have stepped off already?
They did, yes.
Well, we all certainly appreciate you all coming and joining us again for another month of Community Cafe. Next month, we are going to be talking about lead and diversion programs with law enforcement. So if you're able to join us again, it'll be the fourth Wednesday of the month at 10 o'clock. Or if there's any requests that you have of topics that you'd like for us to talk about, we want to keep this as organic, conversational as possible, an open two-way street between partners in the community and our community agencies. And again, thank you so much for joining, and we hope to see you next month.